So now I invite the panel to enter the stage and take your places. We start off with a panel conversation which will be led by Bianca Kramer. Bianca is the Executive Director of the Barcelona Declaration on Open Research Information, an initiative she co-organized and coordinates. With 15 years of experience as an open science librarian at Utrecht University Library, she now works as an independent consultant and a research analyst at Sesame Open Science. So welcome all of you, and I hope that Bianca is ready to introduce the panel participants. The panel will discuss the critical role of openly available scholarly metadata in supporting fair research assessment, policy evaluation, and the accessibility of research. The panel will be talking for around 45 minutes, and then there will be room for questions afterwards. So welcome, and Bianca, I leave the word to you. Thank you.
Yes? This is better, right? Thank you. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be opening the conference, the opening session, with a panel discussion about open scholarly metadata and what publishers can do, strategies publishers can use to make more metadata openly available. So I'm very happy to have Colleen Campbell from OA 2020 and Gentil Becot from CERN, from SCOAP, Dominic Mitchell from DORJ and Mike Nason from the Public Knowledge Project. They will each share a brief presentation about publisher strategies and what is being done to support those strategies. And then we'll have a bit of a wide-ranging discussion. And I also would really like to invite you all to ask your questions to the panel. Before we do that, I will give a brief introduction on the topic. So these are our panelists. And just want to give you a brief introduction about open scholarly metadata and why it is important. And I'm also speaking from the Barcelona Declaration on Open Research Information. And there we talk about research information. But we do mean metadata. Really metadata, so information about the conduct and the sharing of research. So that can mean bibliographic metadata, of articles, books, other research output. It can also mean information on funding, and it can mean information on the use and impact, like citations and other measures of use and impact. And why is that important information? It's that information that's often used in decision-making around strategic priorities, allocation of resources, evaluation of researchers and research institutions. It's also used to assess the effect of policies. If, as a funder or as a research institution, you've got an open access policy, you've got an open data policy, to check the effectiveness of that policy, you use metadata. You check how many articles have been published and which of those articles have been made open access and which form of open access. The same for data. And importantly, it's also used for discovery. It's used by researchers, by societal stakeholders to find and assess research. If you use a bibliographic database, then you are using research information. You are using metadata. So with that, why do we feel it's important for this information, for these metadata to be open? There are a number of reasons for that, and those include that when we perform assessment and evaluation, and we do that based on closed evidence, so we use databases that are closed, that are not available to everyone, it's not transparent. It's often not even transparent for the people being assessed, what they're being assessed on. So we would say that fair assessment requires full transparency. In addition, when decision-making is done based on information in closed and selective databases, and just to name names, for instance, Scopus and Web of Science, we all know that these are selective databases. that means that you're making those decisions based on a narrow set of information on research outcomes, usually English language, global north, and STEM. I'm exaggerating, but in general, those are the directions of those biases. And we would say that equitable decision-making requires inclusive data. And that's not to say that open databases by definition are always more inclusive, but it means that you can combine data from different sources and make sure that you are more inclusive. And then finally, when we talk about open science monitoring and incentivizing, when we do that based on closed information, that's a contradiction. So I would say that open science requires open research information. Now, these are all very value-based statements. I'm very comfortable with that discourse, but there are also other arguments. You can have a discussion about economic value, both in the amount of money that can be made of it, but also in the exclusion, which that means for affordability. There's discussion to be had about digital sovereignty, who controls, who owns this information, and about when this information finds its way into artificial intelligence, about trustworthy information and where that's coming from. So that's where, for the Barcelona Declaration, we are calling upon research institutions and research funders to contribute to this transition. I will talk about publishers in a second, but we're calling upon universities, funders, evaluation agencies to make openness the norm for the research information you use and also you produce. So take the responsibility that information from the research you fund is openly available. From that flows the second commitment to work with services and systems, including publishers, that enable open research information to be available. And that in turn include support of those infrastructures, data providers, and service providers. And finally, the final commitment is to work together on this, because yes, it's something that requires change at each individual institution, but it's often easier when done together, and there's room for collective action. And I think in the program we talk a lot more about collective action in various areas. So switching to publishers, because today we are going to talk about publishers. This is an overview. I won't go into detail about this, but the coverage of different types of metadata in Crossref for journal articles. And take note that this access does not go to 100%. Even for references, the current coverage for recent articles is only about 60–70%. And it's even lower on the bottom for affiliation and funder information. So there's a lot of information that's not openly available via Crossref, but that you can get through closed databases. And we had discussions with publishers about why that is. And again, I won't go into detail, but a schematic publisher workflow starting with collecting that information, either from authors or from the full text, then that information to propagate through the system, and in the end, the information to be made available to metadata aggregators like Crossref and to search engines. And when we ask publishers, where are the problems, what's difficult, it's mostly was indicated that in those first stages, collecting that information, either from authors in submission systems or by extracting from full text. Not so much in that last part, although we also know that publishers who do have this information often do not make it openly available. So I would say there's definitely also need for attention to that last part. So in general, making publication metadata openly available, looking at the role of publishers, it requires changes at the technical, operational, and strategic level. And that can including the ask for open metadata in publisher negotiations. It can also mean thinking of open meta as part of open science practices. It can mean supporting the development of technical and human capacity to actually do this work. And it can also mean connecting metadata practices, because we're not just talking about journal articles, we're not just talking about DORs, and we're not just talking about Crossref, but connecting metadata practices. And to speak to each of these topics, we have our four great panelists, and I would like to now invite Colin Campbell to have the first short presentation on publisher negotiations. Please keep your questions to each of the speakers for after all the presentations.
Thank you. Does the sound okay? No? I turned it on? Okay. All good now? I think so. Hi, everyone. All right, just a quick sense of who we are. OA 2020 is a global alliance of library leaders and institutions, research organizations, working together to accelerate the transition to open access by transforming the underlying economics of scholarly publishing. From the beginning, our ambition has been to make open the default by redirecting subscription money to support open access publishing instead of paywalls. And really it's about empowering researchers to publish openly in the venues and journals where they choose to publish, which is where it's most relevant for their work. This is why really what we are aiming to do is realign institutional investments and publishing practices around openness. As you can see from this map, you see it's not just a question of open access negotiations with publishers in Europe, where we are based and where this strong movement started. It's really gained traction and is happening all around the world. But let me make this real for us. We are in Norway, and so I brought a simple graphic. What we are seeing here is the research article output of Norway, and organized by publisher, where the proportions of articles by Norwegian authors is published ultimately in the journals of these publishers, okay? You can see some of the big names that are probably you're very familiar with. But we also know that a lot of these publishers, their business models are still very much rooted in subscription paywalls. Now, adding to this, I have a new view. It's still the article output of Norway, and I will say this is based on Web of Science data, so it's not the full picture, but it's a big part of the picture. What we can see here is the proportion of articles that, in the peachy color you see, has been enabled open access thanks to the negotiations of the Norwegian Library Consortium, SIKT, I think, S-I-K-T. So you can see the impact that these negotiations are actually having in enabling open access to Norwegian research. Now, however, as we dig deeper in these negotiations, it's helping us gain an understanding that openness of articles isn't enough. We need to get more into control of the visibility, the data, the control of the actual information that underpins the whole system. Because without this data, we simply can't see the full picture. We can't track the trends. We can't evaluate equity or know whether public investments are producing fair and sustainable outcomes. So to make this a little more concrete, I have scatter plot here taken from an article which I recommend everyone reads by Banek and Waltman. Ludo Waltman is very closely involved in the Barcelona Declaration. What do we see here? We see, I hope you can see clearly enough, this shows two things. The number of articles of major publishers, the number of articles they publish, and the percentage of those articles with an openly available abstract, a very basic metadata element. Now, you can see over here on the left-hand side, we have a lot of publishers which openly whose abstracts are openly available. But then over here on the right, you see big publishers, Elsevier, for example, Taylor and Francis, IEEE, ACS. These are publishers who do not make abstracts openly available. So these are, now I just have another view of the same. What I've circled here are the publishers with whom the Norwegian Library Consortium has an agreement for open access publishing. So these are the same publishers that are benefiting from our national investments in open access publishing. We have invested significantly to give our researchers a route to open access, but too often the metadata that would make the openness fully meaningful remains closed or incomplete. We're paying for publishing services, but the system is not fully delivering the transparency and information we need. Another view. This is the same type of visualization, and what we're focused on is publishers who provide open affiliation data of authors, okay? Now, again, the Norwegian consortium is very fortunate. They have a wonderful bibliometrics and data analytics team who are able to dig in and find the data that might not be openly available. Maybe they subscribe to services that enable them to have access to data, but not every library has access to expensive tools, like Web of Science, for example. So to negotiate effectively, we need to be on equal footing with publishers. Everyone, all library consortia in the world need to have an understanding of where their authors publishing. How much are they paying in APCs out of control or without support from their institutions? So this is where the expertise of OA 2020 and the new mission of the Barcelona Declaration really come together to ensure that open access is not only about articles, but about the information that makes them visible, trackable, and useful for the entire research community. So this is where I would like to just introduce a new joint task force on negotiating openness of publication metadata that we have embarked on OA 2020 together with the Barcelona Declaration. The focus here is to make open metadata a standard and enforceable element through our publisher negotiations. We are already partnering with publishers, negotiating very hard on certain objectives. Now we need to broaden those objectives around accountability for open research information. And so I think I've given you a good overview of the scope of our work. I would leave you with a call to action, and that is to support your national negotiation team in having a mandate for open research information in their next round of negotiations.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Yeah, and next up, Anne-Chantal Becot from CERN, who will talk about the SCOAP initiative. And do you have a microphone for Anne? Just hand it is fine.
Do you hear me? Hello. Is it better now? Do you hear me better? Yes. So, hello, my name is Anne-Chantal Becot. I come from CERN in Geneva. I'm part of the Open Science team, and I'm the Scope 3 operational manager. Today I will speak about Scope 3 and a new mechanism we have enabled in our contract structure with the publisher. I will start with a small description of Scope 3. So Scope 3, I guess most of you know it. It's a consortium for the sponsoring consortium for open access publishing in particle physics. It includes a partnership of more than 3,000 libraries and institutions around the world who are together to fund collectively the publication of articles in open access in the most important journals in high energy physics. Scope 3 model is an equitable model where everyone contributes to the funding based on how much they use the service. And it's equitable also because everyone can publish even if they don't contribute to the consortium. So the consortium finances the publication of articles in 11 journals from seven publishers. And so far we have published almost 80,000 articles. The Scope 3 has started in 2014. And so in 2024, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the consortium. And we were also preparing the next phase of Scope 3 because Scope 3 works in phase. So we are ending the phase 3 and preparing the phase 4. And the consortium decided met to decide on the future of Scope 3, and it was decided to add a new component in the contract with the publishers, and it's what we call the open science elements component in this contract. So the idea is to keep the contracts as they were with the publisher. So as a reminder, the contracts with the publisher last since 2012, where we did a call for tender to attribute contracts with publishers, and the prices are still from the 2012 call for tender. So the idea was to add another component and to add open science elements in the contracts with the publishers to incentivize them to provide more services to the community. So the idea is to link the provision of these open science elements with a financial contribution. And this financial contribution can actually be positive, so up to plus 15% on their maximum contract value, but it can be also negative, minus 10% on their maximum contract value. So the idea is really to give publishers incentives to give more open science services to the community. So how it works, we are the consortium, so representatives of all partners in the consortium have defined these open science elements, and they have been included in the contract. And each year, the CERN Scope 3 team evaluates for all the publishers the open science elements provided, and collaborate with the publishers in this evaluation, meaning that the evaluation is done by the Scope 3 team, but then publishers have a say on the data we have used and how we have evaluated. It's really a discussion. It's a transparent discussion. Then once the evaluation is done, there is a calculation of the adjustment of their contract. And it's done for the respective year. And this will be done every year. So every year there will be an evaluation. Every year there will be an adjustment of the contract value. So what are those open science elements? So they are mainly based on open transparency of metadata and research. So there is more the integration of Aurore in the metadata, integration of ORCID, dataset linkings and software code linking, the option to offer public or transparent peer review in the journal, the depositing of detailed metadata to Crossref. So in the contract, a list of fields that are mandatory and additional have been defined, and publishers are evaluated on that. Excellence in accessibility. Here we speak about web accessibility and adherence, transparency on some values that have been defined by the Scope 3 community. I won't define those values, but here in this last element, what we measure is not exactly if they have the same values as defined by the community, but if the publishers are transparent on that. So there is, with the evaluation of those open science elements, there is really an incentive to publishers to provide more persistent identifiers, better metadata quality, offer more innovative open science practices, more accessibility and transparency. And so these are the results of the 2025 evaluation. So in 2025, publishers could have up to 25 points on those open science elements, and the Scope 3 average among all publishers is 15. So you see that there is still improvement that can be achieved. So some elements are have been well achieved by some publishers, some much less. There is a large discrepancy in the results. You can see, I cannot display everything here, but you can see the full results on the Scope 3 website. But what is really important in this process for us is that it has to be a dialogue with the publishers. The aim is not to punish them because they didn't do well, but more to help them or to make that they do better for the Scope 3 journal, but also beyond on the whole portfolio. And we will, in a few months, in a few weeks, start the new evaluation for 26. So we hope there will be some improvement. It's really the hope we have with this process.
Great, thank you very much. The next, Dominic Mitchell from Day1.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Dominic Mitchell, the Deputy Director of DOAJ. For those of you who don't know what DOAJ is, we're an index of quality peer review open access journals. We have 22,218 journals as of this morning from 140 countries covering 91 languages. And on top of that, we have 11.8 million pieces of article metadata. So all of that metadata is open by default, and we have a CC0 waiver on it. And the reason that we do that is to encourage the uptake and the distribution of that metadata to increase the impact of the journals and the articles that are being sent to us. So it's really important at DOAJ that we remember the profile and the differences of the journals that we're dealing with. We have a long tail of very, very small publishers that have a variety of access to technical abilities and to different resources. Only 49% of the journals in DOAJ are single account sort of journals. So it's one journal, one account. That means we're dealing with a huge range of individuals, journal managers, editors, publishers, and we have to remember that when we are trying to facilitate metadata being sent to us. So to do that, we keep the technical barriers low. And so, for example, we have an XSD that has 14 different elements in it, 19 different elements. Only 4 of those are compulsory. So we really try and make sure that we can encourage that metadata upload and keep it as simple as possible. We have 4 different routes to provide metadata to us, and we allow DOAJ XML and Crossref XML. And importantly, we don't have any requirements around frequency. And this is really to echo what Anne said. We're here to encourage the publishers, the journal managers, the editors. We're here to help them. And yet, 18% of the journals in DOAJ have never sent us any article metadata. So I don't know what 18% is of 22,218, but it's a lot. And you see that as you go up and count the articles that are in there, that number starts to increase fairly rapidly. And we know that some journals maybe send us a test issue and then don't do any more, or they may send us, sort of 1 or 2 articles and then they'll go away and come back. But by the time you count 50 articles, that's already over a quarter of the journals in DOAJ that haven't sent that metadata to us. And actually, in the last 24 months, 34% of the journals haven't sent us any metadata at all. And that, I think, is the message that we're putting out to publishers the whole time, encouraging them to do this because it really does increase the impact and the visibility. And it's all open metadata. There is progress. When I started at DOAJ in 2013, I sent out a survey to some publishers, and 55% of them did not use DOIs. I mean specifically DOIs. And then you'll see that by the time we get to 2025, there's only 18% of publishers that don't use DOIs, according to the information that they've given us in DOAJ. 1%, a further 1% use a different sort of article identifier, but it still means that 17% of all the journals indexed don't use any PIDs at all. And PIDs are important for open metadata, as we've seen in the previous presentations. But DOIs come with a cost, and that makes them not necessarily available to everybody. So, I thought, perhaps vainly, that I was well placed to lead a task force on supporting poorly resourced publishers. And we are a group of 11 individuals that have come together from across journal and book publishing. And we are using our collective experience to produce some concrete outputs. So we are going to build awareness. We're going to put together a proper training and knowledge sharing scheme to try and convince publishers of, why open metadata is important. And we're going to create a list of mandatory and optional metadata that we think will be best placed to get their metadata out into the systems. But we have to be mindful, of course, we are a group of 11 publishers. We need to realize that, we have our sort of subconscious biases, and that there are lots of different scholarship outputs, and they all come with their own metadata requirements. We have representation from books and journal publishers in the group, not so much from preprints, but we need to take that into consideration. And we all have great communities, so we're working with them as well. Importantly, we know that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. For those of you who remember back to 2020, there was a fantastic initiative, Metadata 2020, that tackled a lot of this already, tried to set some foundations. We're using that. If any of you have been involved in any of the European projects around Diamond Open Access, you'll know that they've put together a tool suite that has lots of training materials. So we're going to use those, build on those, and focus them according to our task force. We expect to have results of a literature review that's going on now by January 2026, and then we'll have further outcomes of the tasks by the end of June. So the deliverables being a proper training program, and then a definitive list of what those required and desirable metadata elements are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Tom. And then finally, Mark Nason from the Public Knowledge Project.
Hey, gang. I'm awake, are you? Barely. I'm Mike Nason from PKP. I also am a librarian at the University of New Brunswick. We're very fond of saying phrases like, we wear many hats. I wear one all the time. I'm a super professional person. Let's talk a little bit about PKP. The Public Knowledge Project is a software development and research facility at Simon Fraser University. We conduct research into issues impacting scholarly communications. We develop free and open source software towards a more diverse, inclusive, and accessible model for scholarly publishing. Since 1998, so we've celebrated our 25th anniversary not too long ago, PKP's mission has been to research, develop, support open infrastructure, and increase the quality, diversity, and reach of scholarly publishing. In a lot of ways, PKP's mandate is sort of to return control of publishing back to scholars and away from major publishers. PKP software is developed, maintained, and sustained by a global community of developers. Some of them are here today, with a variety of users and translators and financial contributors and strategic partners. It's really a large group of people who care a great deal about open scholarship. PKP develops these three platforms primarily, and they're used around the world for scholar-led, community-driven publishing of journals, preprints, and monographs. That's OJS, Open Journal Systems, the one probably most of you are familiar with. Open preprint systems for preprint server applications, and then Open Monograph Press, the monograph wing of PKP. There's Zoe, I said it. I promised Zoe I'd mention OMP. Globally, OJS is very broadly distributed, 55,000 plus active journals worldwide, which is quite a lot, publishing across 150 countries and in 60 languages. So when we start to think about metadata, that becomes a real challenge. We're talking about the number of different languages people could be publishing in and how their metadata is handled downstream by any number of locations. The thing about facilitating an open science revolution where researchers take back control of their work is that you also have to abandon some of your control over what they will do, much in the way that Dominic was saying, a limited lowering the floor for, or lowering the ceiling for the metadata they need, making things easy sometimes results in things not really working out in an ideal way. OJS lets users do a lot of things, but what's more difficult is steering them towards tasks tedious, responsible, or underappreciated. And metadata is all three. I often say that metadata is something that happens to researchers, not for researchers. It's hard to explain the benefits to them, and they're busy people and they're doing a lot. And when they're responsible for all the metadata entry, they tend to drop balls. Some of you are well versed in this. Hi, Bianca. Just recently released a poster sort of evaluating our metadata distribution. I think we do okay. Generally, but we do have room for improvement. I understand that's very small, but you can go see Bianca's poster, which is a much better source for that. The big reason we can even talk about quality in OJS, though, at this scale is because indexing and discovery tools are finally exposing the rough spots for us. I think for a long time, many of our journals were just sort of discoverable in Google Scholar. And as more of those journals have embraced PIDs, they're generating better metadata. We're pushing metadata out via OAI PMH. We're pushing things to other places. Now we have a better idea of where our metadata is deficient. So as more journals use DOIs or enable ingest into OpenAIRE, as we look to OpenAlex or slam the Crossref API with big greedy queries, which we do often, we can finally see where we missed a few spots while painting the mural. So we have a lot of challenges. We have user literacy, both for publishing and for software, balancing ease of use with the complexity of publishing, a diverse user base running a wildly divergent installation base that could span any number of patches and releases. Probably the biggest issue for us is that we have, from OJS 3.1 released 10 years ago to OJS 3.5 released this year. And as improvements go, it doesn't mean everybody's able to update the software along with us. Facilitating better indexing and discoverability for journals not yet using DOI is a big priority. As Dominic mentioned, it costs money. So we need to find other ways to index people who can't afford them. Making sure that the value of metadata is understood by users and that we're asking them for it in a sensible way. In our draft prioritization for OJS 3.6 and 3.7 moving forward, we have metadata on over half of the things that we're identifying as priorities. We've missed a couple targets, I think. What we'd really like to do is tighten things back up so that we're making sure that we have everything we need and everything users need to be both discovered and to have these metrics available more broadly. We fully refactored our DOI registration for 3.4. We've recently partnered with Crossref, just like a month or so ago. Hi, guys. And that's going to result in a bunch of better features for our metadata, making sure metadata goes downstream better. But another thing that Crossref is actually really interested in helping us facilitate is more resources for upgrading and encouraging more users to upgrade so that they have the newer versions of schemas and they're able to push better metadata downstream. But we can also put our thumbs on the scale a little more, I think, rethinking some approaches to the default OJS settings, putting more effort into specific configuration recommendations, leaning into the expertise of our hosting and documentation and library publishing communities, user communities. There may be value in making our slates a little less blank, so sort of steering users into the direction of better metadata recording and then hoping they do it. It's not always guaranteed. There's a little sneak preview here. We've got metadata quality improvements. We've got rewrites of the quick submit plugin, which are used by lots of people, changing permissions, making some metadata optionally displayed differently. Probably the biggest problem in metadata work in journals is that people will put things in a place they ought not to have it appear in a place on a website. Probably the worst abuse. So making sure that we can give people options for putting things in a responsible location, improving multilingual metadata, so on and so forth. So we're working on it. PKP have always strived to enable good metadata practices, but we cannot force our users to do things. But what we can do is encourage them a little bit more and find ways to facilitate quality metadata that don't obstruct or complicate publishing workflows. And that's me. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe take it.
I'm hanging on to
Okay, thank you very much, all of our panelists, for sharing these multiple perspectives on approaches for publishers to make more metadata available, either through negotiations as part of an incentive around open science practices, but also very much emphasizing the capacity issues and how to make sure that we are inclusive and including also smaller publishers And to echo Mike, that in case, find a balance between encouraging and requiring, perhaps. And thank you also very much for staying on time, because it will give us time to have a little bit of a wider discussion. And also, in a minute, I would like to invite all of you to ask your questions. But maybe to bring things together, I would like to ask each of you a short question. What do you think is currently the biggest barrier for publishers for not making more metadata openly available, from your specific perspective, from where you're sitting? Colleen?
Well, just for fun, because I know so I can say something different from my colleagues here, I will focus on two of the examples we saw in the graphic that I presented, Elsevier and ACS. What is prohibiting them from making their abstracts openly available? That is because they have products that they sell to libraries and institutions. And so they have a business that is built on this. And I think, though, that we, as the research community globally, and through alliances that we have, we can put pressure on them together. So I would say that is where we can act.
Thanks very much. Anne?
Hello? Is it open? Yeah. Yes. So here I can speak on the what we could observe and when we did this Scope 3 evaluation. And for me, it depends on the publishers. In some cases, we clearly see that there is some, the technical aspects is difficult because it means that they need to change the way they handle things, and they have, especially for the big ones, they have to adapt the whole workflow. To collect better metadata or include ROR, for example, in their process. So this is one aspect, but there are also other aspects. In particular, when publishers work also with societies for the publication, sometimes they would like to do something, but they have also to convince the society. So it's also a collaborative work. And it's true that one aspect is also what comes from the authors, that it's maybe not the biggest challenge, but it's true that it's a challenge, in particular in the fields of high energy physics. For example, when we have this huge list of authors in our collaborations, sometimes it's not only, the publisher can do a lot to incentivize the collaborations to provide all the persistent identifiers, but if the collaboration do not, so for me, it's a mix. It's a mix of aspects.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think for the group of journals that I focused on in my slides, this very long tail of small individual publishers, there's definitely lack of resources, and whether that's time, money, knowledge, and I think that's.
I think publishing literacy is a really big problem in academia. I think a lot of the time, I talk to grad students a lot, and they learn about publishing by talking to their advisors. They don't learn about what publishing is from people other than that. So you kind of learn this sort of like folk wisdom about what publishing is supposed to look like. And then eventually at some point you end up as the editor of a journal, and you maybe have never run a journal, and you don't know why the metadata is important or where it goes. You don't know what a DOI does. You think a DOI is important because it's supposed to take people to the thing, but you don't understand the metadata is attached to it. And so I think there's a lot of gaps in the knowledge of the people who are running and operating journals for why any of this stuff matters. When we talk about why it's important to have funder metadata collected, and what that means to the governments who are giving you money, trying to explain that to an editor is whatever, who cares? I'm busy. It's not easy. So I think there's a lot of gaps there in trying to facilitate and educate the people who are running journals about why this stuff is important. Teaching them it's really actually not all that complicated, but still allowing them a little bit of grace and leeway to publish the way they want to publish. It's, I think, really tricky to facilitate those things. At PKP, the objective, I think, is to try to steer people in the right direction by saying, okay, well, abstracts are required, or you have an email address required, or you can kind of have some stuff turned on by default. Stuff like funding metadata, that's a challenge for everybody, right? Affiliation metadata, nobody's really doing tremendous at affiliation metadata. So trying to encourage editors to encourage their authors, having the authors have any awareness of what's important, all that stuff is really tough. So you talk about what all the publishers are doing, but like I'm looking at researchers going like, you guys can fill out an affiliation field. You do it all the time. Could you please just do it? So yeah, I think it's a real blend. But I think publishing literacy is less than many of us may think, just based on my experience of talking to researchers often.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think this nicely illustrates that there's a range of barriers and issues, ranging from awareness, technical capacity, also like business decisions. But I would like to remind you that we've also seen in the presentations that there are directions of travel and that there are approaches to overcome these barriers. And with that, I think we're well in time to now open the floor up for discussion. So any of you have any questions or comments for any of our panelists, your own insights, who can I give the floor to ask a question? Cora in the back, please wait till you get the mic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists. I think we've kind of focused on the challenges and the gaps, which are wide. I wonder if maybe Anne or someone else in the panel could talk to what happens if that metadata is open, like a good case for when the information is openly available, what can be positively done in it, either with developing or evaluating policy or funding programs or other cases.
Thank you for the question.
So, if I understood correctly, you want an example of what is good having the metadata open. Is it correct? Yes? So I think we had already a lot of explanations from Bianca earlier. But in principle, yeah, I think having content open is one thing, but being able to look for this information is even better. And I have a really concrete example. For Scope 3, we monitor the publications from all. I mean, we need to calculate the share of publications for all countries to identify their fair share, and so we use the affiliation field, and we use the country. So we have always done that based on the information we receive from the publisher. But often the affiliation field is a free text, and we have to extract the information from there. So having all much more raw available will be much easier, much better to identify the correct affiliation, the correct country behind. So it's one concrete practical example. But in general, I think traceability and being able to look for information, I mean, not behind, not with Scopus or Web of Science, it's the main incentive to have open metadata.
Anyone else on the panel would like to?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's you know, a lot of people come to DOAJ to get indexed because they know that it's almost like the first stage to getting their journal out there onto the world sort of platform. And so actually, for us, it's about, you know, really encouraging these editors and journal managers that if they, you know, once they get the data into DOAJ, then it is going to get picked up in all these discovery services. And so it's really about, for us, that's the positive side of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions in the audience? Can you also please just introduce yourself when you ask your question?
Hello, my name is Iva Melinchak-Zlody, and I have a question related to one of your first slides. If I remember correctly, all the metadata are being more and more open, except for abstracts in the last year. And there is a drop in open abstracts, so I don't guess that it's just Elsevier and ACS. And I wonder whether this is a trend that we should worry about, and whether this has something to do with abstracts having more value with AI tools, and how should we deal with that? Is it just negotiating with publishers, or also relying more on our own infrastructures like CRIS systems and repositories, and taking care of ownership and copyright over abstracts? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. I have things to say about that, but maybe since you mentioned the negotiations, Colleen, do you want to?
Sure. I would say it's not either or, of course. I mean, it has to be across the board. So we have work to do within our organizations, and we have work to do in raising our expectations with publishers. And I would say you make a great point in AI is now, the advance of AI is now creating this new tension in the scholarly communication ecosystem that relates to not only to abstracts, but scholarly publishing itself. I mean, so we have to be double down, I would say, double down and stay united around our objectives for openness, and not just the content itself, but the metadata. Because I do see threats, yeah.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, yes, we do see abstract coverage specifically go down. Not just in Crossref, but one thing that we have been seeing is, for instance, OpenAlex, that is getting their abstracts from Crossref, but also from other sources, publisher landing pages, other sources. We've seen in the last 2 years, specifically Elsevier and Springer Nature, though abstracts for non-open access articles being taken down from OpenAlex. So that's really an enclosure of abstracts. So I think, yes, really emphasizing the importance of that in negotiation, but also, like you say, making that available to other means, to our repositories, to our quiz systems, and exposing it in that way, and being very deliberate about that will also increase the availability of it.
Hi. Hello. I'm Dana Christensen. I'm from the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. And thank you for very interesting presentations. I was intrigued by the comment on how researchers don't have good literacy on publication process. And, as a researcher, I was wondering if there are any resources that you would recommend, pointing to, or any sort of, any materials online maybe that we could point our students to find out more about the publishing process, rather than relying on the folk wisdom, as you mentioned.
Yeah, sorry to call researchers out so bluntly. I think it's interesting because, for academics, your career is based on the quality of your publications and where you publish, and publishing is such a vitally important part of publishing, and yet so many people just kind of publish on a setting I would describe as autopilot. I would recommend, in any situation, find a person like me who is a ScholComm's librarian at your institution, and usually those conversations happen in a way that is well, where do you want to publish? What do we need to know about publishing? Because the tough part is that every discipline has its own publishing culture, right? I can't speak about publishing as though it is monolithic. If I talk to somebody in physics, by the time something is published in certain segments of physics, by the time it's published, it's already out of date. They're moving on preprints, and they're going in a totally different way. Or if I'm talking to computer science, they're publishing in proceedings, open access, completely different. If I'm speaking to people in English or history, a much longer tail and a slower publishing piece. So I think what would work is thinking about, take a thesis or a dissertation and talking to students as though this is your first publication. What do you want to happen to it? What kind of license do you want? This is yours. Did you know this is yours? And you can make decisions about it? Because most of the time researchers get to the point where they're signing publisher agreements and they're I'm just supposed to do this. So they sign away their copyright and they sign away all this other stuff. And they never think to ask those questions, and they never think about the ownership. And there's this other piece, this sort of promotion pressure, right? So I tell students about open access and they're very excited about it. And then I say, well, I can't publish in an open access journal because everybody's telling me I need to publish in this high impact factor journal. And high impact factor journals are high impact factor journals because they're high impact factor journals. So like it's not like they're special. They're just the place everybody publishes, and that's why people publish there. Like, well, I have to publish here to be taken seriously. I can't draw a line in the sand, and they have precarious employment. So I think it's like a broad cultural change in thinking about your work as belonging to you, and empowering researchers to kind of understand that. And then you can start to look at find your communities of practice and try to encourage those people to publish. I don't think there's just like a publish like a responsible human being resource. I think it's trickier than that. It's like a cultural change amongst academics to get them to think a little bit differently about what publishing is and who it's for. And it's not for publishers, but we've really made it that way, I think. Is that at all helpful? I hope it's helpful. I'm trying to empower people to push back a little bit, I think.
Anyone want to add to that? Yeah, I think it's a great question and a great answer. That's for researchers. I would also add for editors at universities who are starting their own journals. You ask for specific resources. I know, for instance, the Craft2Web project, the European project to support diamond publishing. They're also compiling and make available resources for editors specifically around publishing. So just to add to that. I think we've got time for one or two more follow-up questions. Yes?
Hi, John Treadway. Dom, I just wondered if you were able to dig in at all to those statistics about the organisations that don't send you metadata. Is it journals with very few? Is it publishers with very few journals? Is it the larger publishers that are just not good at sending it to you? Are you able to say a bit more about whether it echoes any of the other trends we've seen?
Sure, yeah. So the larger publishing organizations in DOAJ have almost all now connected themselves to our API. So the API, and that's so automated, that process. So they've taken the time, they've had the money and the resources and the knowledge to build a connection to our API. So it's almost always these small social science and humanities, lots of Indonesian journals, lots of Indonesian universities. In order to get funding, individual departments have to start a journal. We're seeing lots of that. And also I think that, the importance of giving us that metadata doesn't really get through for them. It's about start a journal and publish stuff. No one thinks about what happens then. It's the same with long-term digital preservation, but that's a separate talk. So it's definitely these small, under-resourced publishers, not necessarily from the low middle-income countries or anything like that, but we see them spread over the whole of the world. It just depends really on what this volunteer editor or journal manager has access to.
And maybe to build on that, I would say that's exactly those journals who would benefit the most from increased visibility, because also those journals that are often not included in proprietary databases. One final question. Yes. We're letting our mic runner work.
Hello. Is the mic on? Yes, it's great. I'm Joanna Ball from DOAJ, and I was really taken by something Mike said about metadata being tedious. And of course, there is one group of people for whom metadata isn't tedious at all. It's what they do every day, and that's librarians. So how can we kind of harness the expertise and the capacity of librarians to help solve this problem?
Boy, what a question, hey? I think so if you look at initiatives like Comet, where they're saying, what would be really great is if we could sort of have a communal approach to correcting incomplete or poor metadata sort of post-publication, this sort of swooping in behind and cleaning stuff up. Librarians are very tempted to do that kind of work. I've met librarians who are happy to populate an author's ORCID profile, which is, I think, a path to madness. It is not a productive use of my time as a human being to retroactively fill out forms for someone who should have done it in the first place. And I think that when the idea of sort of metadata wonks, and you're right, like part of the reason I'm so tough on researchers is because I care about metadata, I know why it's important. But I've also come to kind of understand that like, maybe metadata is supposed to suck a little because it's written by human beings who are busy. Like it's an indication of the industry we work in, that people are stressed out and constantly filling out metadata. And maybe it's always going to be like a little bad, and maybe that's okay. And maybe that's just a coping mechanism that allows me to sleep and not just exist in the fetal position underneath my desk. But I think there's like you're right, but I think the literacy piece is explaining to people why that stuff is important and to have some diligence in the front. I think there's also the benefit of like, you know, when a funder allows somebody to ingest all their publication metadata via ORCID. Like the more we can kind of leverage open scholarly infrastructure to improve metadata, the better. I really love OpenAIR and that it can kind of combine records. Like that kind of stuff is really nice. I don't really support AI at all. But any way we could find to automate and combine metadata is good. I think it's just literacy. I think librarians could actually probably relax a little bit, and it wouldn't be bad for their mental health. But I think it's a risk to say there are people who would love to correct this. Couldn't they maybe do it for us? I don't want to. Like I would much rather people understand and take that stuff seriously when they do it, because publishing is important. When an author's submitting a paper, like to me, there's no excuse for a person to go like, well, I don't know what goes in this field, so I won't fill it out. I have a librarian colleague who once uploaded something to our repository, and underneath copyright statement, he wrote, "Fuck if I know." And I was like, look, that's funny, but you need to know what copyright is. And I think it's just a thing where people sort of, they're doing so many other things. Everything's a priority. They're being asked to fill out 1 million forms, and it's easy for them to not do it. Can we do a better job of making that easier for people? Yeah.
Thanks very much. And I think this already speaks to like what are actionable things that we could ask, for instance, librarians to do. And I would like to finish with that. We are at time, so I would like to ask a panelist to be really quick. And Mike, I think you had your opportunity here with that. So I would just like to go to Dom and Colleen. Really quickly, like one action that any of the stakeholders here in the room could take that will take this course further. Dom.
Build metadata creation and open metadata distribution into publication workflows from the beginning.
Thank you. Anne.
Be aware and acknowledge that metadata is important and everywhere, I mean by all actors.
Colleen?
I said it before, really have an understanding of who your negotiators are and support them in making open research information part of their negotiation mandate.
Thank you very much. I think together, this gives a broad picture. This is something that involves us all. And I would love to be here next year and share with you how far we've come in 1 year with everyone's help. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Bianca Kramer and the panel participants.